Hi, this is the 7.2 podcast, the only podcast we desperately don't want you to watch. I'm Austin,
I'm Chandler.
And I'm Jim.
and today we're going to be talking about uh, time criminals, or chronocriminales, as the creators would say it, and The Descent, a, a real showcase of just how disparate two shows with the same rating can be.
I do think the
Um,
official English name is Time Crimes instead of Criminals.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes much of a difference, but there's only one criminal, so it'd be kind of weird to call it Time Criminals, plural.
It's also
oh,
the
but there's two
they're like
criminals.
accomplices. Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah, because there's Hector, and then there's the dummy scientist who
So
lets us all get out of
Hector,
hand.
there's Hector 2, there's Hector 3.
Yeah, of course, of course. There's just three Hectors. But Austin, what is Time Crimes?
So Time Crimes is it's a movie about time travel uh where the primary conceit is a guy basically tries to reconcile going back in time around like 24 hours, where he's attacked. It starts, he sees something in the woods, he goes there, sees a sketchy situation, gets attacked by a dude in a bandage, don't know yet. Pretty quickly though, you figure out it's himself because he has to create a time situation that involves him not being dead, his wife not being dead, and he could give a fuck about anything else. So he, after abusing a poor scientist for a little bit and abusing himself a couple times for good measure, he figures out how to save his wife and himself at the expense of a random stranger that he basically just murdered. And he and a very interesting part about it is he always knows he cannot stop because the very fact that you know certain events happen that try to convince him to stop, he knows that it's going to happen either way. Well, I don't know if he knows that, but that's one of the really smart things that we do. Anyway, that's Time Crimes. Now, for The Descent, it's a dumb movie that hates uh, caving or splunking, and it basically said, "Hey, we invented through evilness and stupidity a really scary situation on its own, and also let's add some dumbass monsters."
I'm glad we
Like,
share the same opinion of that. Because they really truly were like, here's a terrifying situation, and then there's monsters.
There's dumbest. I, I thought they were going to be Wendigos, but they're just nothing. They're just like
blind humans, I
things.
guess.
Yeah, I guess.
I was expecting there to be monsters in the movie because it's a horror film, and then they like set up the cave, and I was like, this is already pretty intense. And then there were monsters. And I was like, oh, okay. Thought we were gonna do something different, but we didn't.
Yeah, I do. I like. I did want there to be monsters because I really like it when you have an already scary situation, and then monsters on top of that already scary situation. I think that's always a good formula.
I
But
I sorry.
the monsters in this fucking suck.
Well, I think a big thing for me is that the monsters kind of replaced the scary situation. They were no
Yeah.
longer afraid of traversing through the cave. They just kind of now needed to. And so it
Yeah,
wasn't an issue anymore. They just did.
yeah. It
Yeah,
wasn't even like it was hard for them. They were supernaturally good climbers.
Hmm.
Like climbers so good, if you didn't know better, you would swear that they were hung by a suspension cord while they're doing half their moves.
so they only have trouble early on, but like what Jim was saying, if the monsters hadn't been there, they would have instantly got out as soon as the monsters showed up. Like as soon as the monsters would have showed up otherwise. Like there was no like caving challenge beyond that point.
Well, they
There
never found
could
the
have
exit.
been.
Like caves are
There
very
could have been
labyrinth thing.
more. Yeah. They could have set up a more elaborate situation. They could have had the
Oh, they could
cave
have.
in
They did
separate
it.
the group. Well, I'm saying like if they could have had a movie without the monsters. They totally could have.
Wait,
I mean, they could have. I I always like a good bit of monsters. I always enjoy monsters. That's my favorite kind of horror film is just monsters. But and
did
like I think they.
Austin?
So, yeah, do you want to say something, Austin?
Or do you
yeah,
just want
before we proceed, did you guys watch the UK version or the US version?
I don't fucking know. What's the
no
difference?
clue.
In the end, does the woman get out of the cave?
Yes.
Oh my god, I watched the US version, didn't I?
Yes.
Wait, what happens in the UK version actually?
Uh, it has that whole thing, like situation for her getting out of the cave, and it turns out she's just hallucinating in there, and she was still deep in the cave. The
Yeah,
whole.
that works for Brazil. That's fucking stupid for this.
Hmm.
Also, not
So
only
wait,
that,
did we
they
watch
made a
different
sequel.
versions of the movie? Or did we all watch the same
No.
one?
Well, I mean, I watched the UK version, and the UK version was so stupid. I had to look up why the fuck there's two endings to my movie, and I found.
Oh my god, that is like
Okay.
usually the US version is like they pull optimism out of their ass. It's like, oh, it's a way worse ending because it makes no sense that they had a happy ending at the end of this. Whereas this is just that just makes no fucking sense that you'd all of a sudden just be like, oh wait, no, it turns out it's they just all die. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also,
especially
like
after
Chandler
she
started to
killed.
say, they have a sequel. Like there's a
In which he is alive. So the US version is the canon version.
Well, shit.
But yeah, Austin, I have to ask, were you rooting for the main character? Because I
No.
was not. I wanted her to die. So
I was.
maybe I would have liked the UK ending better because I wanted her to die.
You want you to die in such a stupid way, though. That's the question.
Fair. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
I.
there's a whole part where one of the people caving is fighting against these monsters, and she accidentally kills her friend. And keyword accidentally. Now she does not handle the situation well. She leaves her friend to die, and another friend finds out about it. The main character. The main character then proceeds to kill the person who killed this girl accidentally. There
Well,
was no
actually, you'll
conversation
find she
beforehand.
did actually kill her.
Whatever. It's an implied death, regardless of whether or not she survives for the sequel. I'm not gonna watch the sequel.
The
Well,
sequels don't have a 7.2.
I'm not gonna. The sequel's a lot lower than 7.2.
It's like a 5.8.
I'm not saying that the first girl is not at fault for killing her friend, but like I don't necessarily think she deserves to die, considering the situation and everything. It seemed like somewhat reasonable that she accidentally, like, her friend saw her kill a monster and then decided, let me jump scare her. And then she got mad when she got a spike to the neck. Like, the situation was like pretty bad, and like an accident happened. I
Yeah,
don't think she
I
deserves
don't,
to die for it.
no, I don't blame her. Like, I do really like the characterization of that character where she is like physically very like brave and strong and capable, but emotionally she's an abject coward.
Mhm.
Um, and I do like the idea that that is kind of her downfall in this film. And it's like there's like things like that kind of theme intersecting like with the logic. Where it's like they both on their own kind of work, but separately. But like when combined, it's like they don't really serve each other very well. It was like because the girl who finds out doesn't really know. All she knows is she fucking murdered this person and then just left.
Mhm.
But that is it's not really like a like the ironic punishment that satisfies like the themes. It's just like wait, why did she just killed her? Just without like really understanding the situation.
Yeah. And like
But
I'm not saying that like there seemed like there could have been they could have worked it in where they actually like had a chit chat, and they kind of tried to do it, and she was like, "Did you see the girl die?" And the first girl said yes, which was a lie. Um, and so that's like the most insight that she gains into the situation is that she's lying to me about one thing in particular.
Which honestly, I don't even really blame her for lying, because if in any real life situation you just stuck an ice axe through a person's neck, that person is dead.
yeah,
Yeah.
like other times, like wow, she is actually very coherent for someone like she's able to speak very well for someone who has a spike text to the threat.
Hmm.
Not only that, but had the axe taken out and left there for an unknown amount of time. Like, the people keep surviving neck wounds incredibly long amounts of time. Like, that's like the one death that's known to be immediate.
Yeah,
Right?
like
Like she wouldn't be able to breathe, so I'd give her like 5 minutes tops, and she had like 30-ish,
well,
which
maybe it's
was
not super clear how much time
it's not
passes.
super clear, but I think it's unreasonable that like the one girl
Yeah,
left and then the other girl came back 5 minutes later after like all that happened in between. So
Yeah, like,
she should have been dead. So yeah, like
well,
I don't think it's unreasonable for the first girl to assume that she saw her die. Like
yeah, totally.
well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, it's not. There's like a lot of misunderstanding here, but it's like kind of sort of makes sense in that respect, but also at the same time that doesn't really serve the themes. It's just it's a big misunderstanding. That's she's dying because of misunderstanding, not because she's a coward.
and like
Right.
her whole thing is like her love for the main character, Sarah. Her whole thing is that she's like, I won't leave without Sarah. I won't do it. And then she finally finds Sarah, and Sarah's just like, all right, time to die, I guess. And so it's
Like,
just like it feels so shitty just all around.
well, there's like a like that character. What's her name? Juno.
Juno, yeah,
Well, first of all, she was a major fucking asshole at the beginning of the movie,
true.
and that like it really contributes to people not trusting her because why the fuck would you trust this person? She is
She
a
did
liar.
she did get everyone into the situation in the first place. So I guess we could say like, hey, she's technically responsible for all the other deaths too. So maybe she deserves to die because of that.
Like,
Like
it'd be
her
one thing.
pride.
See, something that was really necessary in this was her to have a motive for killing that character that person could latch onto and be like, oh shit, I didn't think she would go this far about this, but she did, even though that's not necessarily what happened.
Hmm.
But if you like look at it like logically, it's like, well, yeah, she is a liar and an asshole, but like, why would she kill that person?
Yeah.
Well, the way I kind of saw it was at that moment she was just like self-preservation. Well, I guess I'm gonna kill you and get the fuck out of here. Like full send.
Yeah,
And I don't know. So much about this movie is just is so frustrating, especially since it's like, um, you know, the monsters never act the way you'd expect a feral monster to. Like, do you guys remember the scene where, it's the woman who's like protecting the younger woman. I think the younger woman's her daughter,
yeah.
and like they're going through a section, and like she she looks, she sees the all clear, she goes back, lets her kid go through, and then she turns back, and a guy just like descends from the ceiling. It's
I
like
remember that scene.
they're not strategic like that. They're not like, oh, hold on, we think we can bait her into
Let
like
me spook
sending
her.
out her kid.
Especially,
And
I hated how they acted in that situation as well, because they find out like, oh, the monsters are blind, they're only hearing, and when they go around that corner, they go ah. They like scream a little bit. I'm like, they can see you if you do that. Why would you do like they definitely have better hearing than you. So like probably every monster hears you let out a little scream. Why would you do that? That seems so dumb.
Yeah, well, and honestly, that's really a complaint that could be levied across the whole movie. Like, towards the beginning when the main character starts freaking out because she gets pinned, you know, they portray these people as experienced adventurers who have climbed very often uh, and splunk quite a few times. And anytime you do something like that enough times, you're gonna end up in those kind of situations.
So I did take that as like a compounding of her already, pretty severe emotional vulnerability. Whereas like she was also dealing with like the death of her husband and daughter.
Yeah, this is like very
I
much the
guess.
first time that she's gone on one of these in a while. So it's at least heavily implied that she's
And
getting
she
back
just
into it.
okay.
Okay.
So what the fuck was the voices? What was that? Was that just in her
At what
head?
point?
Yeah, it was just in her head, but I don't know if it served much of a purpose.
I mean, it helps explain the UK ending. The fact that she's like capable of
See,
auditory and
what
physical hallucinations.
the only purpose that it served, in my opinion, is like there's one point where like when she first sees the monster, she comes back to the group and says, "I just saw a dude back there, huge issue." And none of them believe her because they're like, you have hallucinations. Of course you saw a monster, you know. But then in the next scene, they just see one. And so there's this moment of doubt, but it only lasts for like a minute before they just fully see one again. And so
So
it's
she
like they
never.
set up this cool like, oh, someone's gonna die because of this, but no one even died when they first found a monster. So it's just like,
Yeah.
I guess nothing happened.
Also, she never says. She never tells people, "Oh, I'm hearing my daughter."
Yeah, but
They
like
just
they,
assume she's crazy because
I
reasons.
I would assume that they know she's on like uh antipsychotics, right? Like
Is she had antipsychotics? I don't remember that
she
bit.
takes medication at the beginning. I assume
Oh,
if it's for hallucinations, it would be antipsychotics, but
I did
And
not
like,
do that.
there's a scene in the hospital where she's like trying to talk to her kid, and everyone's just literally has to physically restrain her. You know, eh, really, uh, it kind of gets to the center of the problem, which is these are not a group of people who should be climbing together. You know, if the Asian girl wants so badly to explore this new system, people love that shit. She can find a group of really experienced, mentally straight people
yep.
who
Well, they
will have much higher odds of success.
they do establish to be like the. I guess it's also a weird part of this movie where it's like you have the three women who they do establish pretty well. Like they are friends. They know each other very well. They have done things together pretty substantially. And like she, and this is kind of like hey, like this kind of very complex emotional thing going on. Where it's like she felt like she did a shitty thing and wants to make up for it in a very stupid way. Um, and then there's like what four other people who just are there.
At the,
Because,
Go ahead.
people gotta die.
Yeah, you gotta get that like body count up.
I mean, before they start exploring the cave, there's a scene where specifically Juno says, "We all lost something in that crash," which I hate because it feels very very self-centered, but like she's implying that like, oh, we lost our entire friend group to that crash because
So
this friend.
I'm pretty sure, and this is never said anywhere in the movie, which is weird because it seems like it was very heavily implied, but never actually like pays off. I'm pretty sure Juno was sleeping with Sarah's husband.
I did not get that.
Because there's that bit at the beginning where she fishes him out of the lake, and they have this like tender moment where they look into each other's eyes, and then the husband gets called away, and she just looks so blue balled.
Oh my god, I thought that was a totally unrelated person. I was like, oh, okay, so she has a boyfriend too. How are you gonna get involved in this?
I didn't catch that. Okay. I mean,
She thought that was the
that's
reason why she like just docked out of Scotland was she's like, oh my god, I lost this man I'm in love with, but I can't say anything about it because he was married to my best friend.
that makes sense
She is a
actually.
dick.
Yeah.
She is. She's an emotional
Maybe
coward.
she should have died.
Well, depending on the version you watch, they all do. So, bing, bang, boom.
According to the sequel, neither of them die.
Oh God, yeah. Like this entire movie was a mess. It's from the like supernatural climbing abilities of everyone involved until like they
Well,
have
they are
the smallest
established.
issue.
They're established as being like experienced climbers and stuff. Like I didn't really have a problem with it. So it's not like any of this stuff was like. It didn't seem unrealistic for someone who's experienced in this to have that level because they all like whatever was like something was like very hard, like climbing across the ceiling and stuff. It was portrayed as being very hard. The only like two of them could do.
And
And
they wouldn't have done this in the first place if they weren't experienced enough. Like that's why they
well,
were
they don't
doing
know.
it, right?
It's an undiscovered cave. They don't know.
Well, they don't know
And
that, I guess. But they did know that they were going caving, right? They assumed that they had to do some amount of climbing.
well, and that's kind of the thing. Like first, maybe this is losing the forest for the trees here, but A, when you're climbing on a ceiling, you can't have your feet dangling. That's just like anathema to success. B, the equipment they had doesn't make sense for the situation they were in. Um, are basically only good in non-wet environments, um, and like they don't actually like none of their equipment makes sense. None of the moves they did make sense, and the caves themselves aren't like actual geographical features that you would see.
This is something that only someone who knows about caving cares about.
Yeah, like I
Okay.
that's the kind of thing where it's like it's not trying to like the characters aren't supposed to be bad. It's just that I guess the directors
Yeah,
were like, no one's gonna care. This is climby enough.
I don't want to say like you're wrong for pointing this that like I understand like okay if you are someone who's knows about caving, all right, you know what? Fair enough. I can say it didn't fucking bother me.
Yeah,
Like
Okay.
I totally got the intended like what they're going for with that.
same.
Because yeah, the tension of like her with the scenes, and also you know how there's like this whole tension where she sets up the first cam. First thought I had was, why don't they just set up the first cam where they can reach? That way, if she falls, she's caught, right? Like
Yeah,
even in
I
the
guess the idea there is that they don't have enough of them because they did lose half of their equipment.
but I mean that's the thing.
Well,
Like,
then the other woman comes through to save the equipment.
I mean not only that, but it's not like all they are hard points. Like if you they don't need to be evenly spaced. So I'm definitely going to take this moment to talk about dumb climbing stuff that no one cares about. So that's not just the whole thing talking about how dumb and useless they are. Because that was the point the movie turned into a comedy for me. Just like just seeing the writers invent problems that don't exist. And it's like, oh, dude, we need this moment of tension, so they're not allowed to use this thing until a third of the way through, because that makes sense, right?
So I do want to say, Austin,
Yeah.
to your point, I was thinking through that like scene that you're talking about that it's like I don't really get the tension here because surely the entire point of what they're doing is if she does fall, they can catch her.
Like,
And we
well,
see that later
admittedly,
too. Like one of the characters dies while hung up there, and she just stays, despite the fact that
well,
nobody's holding the other end of the rope, if I recall.
funnily enough, the only time it would make sense for someone to fall,
She
they don't.
stays for dramatic effect, I guess.
Which the way she dies is so comical to me. Like, imagine getting your throat slashed and then like, all right, time to kill a motherfucker. Like, damn, I wish
You're not
I had
doing
that
it.
kind of resolve.
It's like rad as hell that she like gets her throat slashed and she's like, "All right, I'm gonna murk this guy now," and then she fails because he's still alive.
Florida.
Because
They're like,
that guy
"No, no,
in
no."
particular fell to the bottom, which apparently has water, because someone just jumps down there later, and when they do, they find one floating in the water, still alive. So,
The knife.
it's like a rad moment that they just decided, oh, let's take this away from her. So dumb.
She gets nothing. She loses. Oh, yeah, that whole movie was just such. It almost felt like a movie fumbling for a purpose and ends up in a situation where it's, you know, it feels like an oddly feminine movie in a way that, uh, were they trying to communicate something with that? Like, why does it just so happen that all these people are female? Why is that even a thing?
Yeah, I don't
And,
know.
and
I
I
guess it
like
doesn't.
in my desperate search for a theme and a purpose, that's all I could really land on.
I don't
But
know. I'm totally okay with like just a straightforward film. But it's weird. Is like we have been tearing this movie to shreds. And, like right now, I feel like this was a bad movie. That being said, when I came out of it, I did feel like I'll give it a 7.2. Why not? I enjoyed it well enough. So
I
I
don't think
really don't.
I didn't hate it. It was
Eh,
fine. I'm not one to like set out and actually watch horror movies very often, so like, eh. But in that regard, it really wasn't very scary. So
yeah,
most of the actual like scary moments are just jump scares, which
I mean, for
keep
me,
it still.
I'm just strip like claustrophobia. Like tight space is one of those few things I will see in a movie and be like, I am freaked out.
mhm.
Whereas like usually it's like, yeah, if I saw a lion in front of me, I'd be scared, but I'm not. Like we'll see it on film, I'm not scared.
Yep.
But, like people in tight spaces, I'm like, ooh,
Yeah, no,
this is.
I mean I'm arachnophobic, so I feel the same way for spiders. So I get that.
Lord of the Rings must have been tough.
You know, weirdly enough, it's not that if it's big enough it's okay. It's more so that if it's unrealistic, it's more okay. Like if
Interesting.
I see something and it's like, okay, I can't really picture myself being in this situation, then it's like, yeah. But when I was
It's
a
not about.
kid, I did hate Lord of the Rings. And fun fact, I made my dad sell our copy of Harry Potter 2 because I wouldn't let him keep it in the house because they go and meet with a bunch of spiders, and they are, or at least most of them are quite realistic. So I couldn't handle it.
I do think for me, like I'm not like super scared of spiders or anything, but I do think size actually does matter for you. It's like if something's like big enough, you know where it is in a room. You're also like hiding behind like a couch or something.
Yeah.
Whereas like like a very like medium size, like this big spider is fucking terrifying. That is the scariest size for a spider.
Yep.
Interesting. Like,
Yeah, because like they have a bit of, yeah, unpredictability about them. But if they're fucking massive, it's like I know where it's gonna go.
inertia means it can only go so far, so fast.
Exactly. It's like nowadays
Yeah.
I don't really have a problem with like Lord of the Rings, but I did as a kid because it was just like maybe my imagination was better. I could picture a gigantic spider.
So, one thing I do want to say before we wrap up talking about The Descent is it is an interesting juxtaposition with another movie that was made more recently, where it is a spelunking expedition gone wrong, and there are no monsters involved. And it was just kind of it was a much more clear, man versus nature narrative. Um, al- Although the only person who survives in that was a woman, so there's that.
Horror,
Uh,
That's
weirdly, a
also a
lot more
horror
kind.
film, correct?
mm,
Okay.
well, let me see if I can find what its actual tags are, because it would either be called horror or suspense.
Or like
I
thriller
don't
or
know.
something like that.
I feel like
Yeah.
horror is a lot more kind to because I feel like a lot is probably like that mid to like block. with women like in action films. It's like what a woman could clearly, never like chop off 50 men's heads. It's like, obviously a man couldn't either, but like in our minds, kind of thing. Like in horror, they always present people as a bit more like realistically capable. So
In
they kind of like help.
Alien, I've actually never seen Alien, but Alien, the woman survives too, right?
Yeah, Ridley and a cat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you never seen it, Jim.
I know, I like, especially when Corona hit, people were drawing like Alien comparisons because they were just like, Ridley, the only person who survives, is the only person to act fully quarantine and not break quarantine.
That was a
And so it was like pretty good narrative there, and everybody else dies.
God, Alien was a fucking great movie.
I need to watch Alien.
Yeah, we should watch Alien together.
Hell
Or
yeah.
not together.
Alien is the good one.
Aliens is also really good for basically opposite reasons.
Oh wait, hold on. Is it rated 7.2?
No.
What
No, it
movie
isn't.
have we even been talking about? I don't think it exists.
But yeah, despite the fact that for me to sit, like I enjoyed the first half of that, but definitely. Oh, I will say, like I do really like having like a supernatural element. It's like I don't know because I know Austin's seen the Terror, but that kind of is the same thing. It admittedly, it also does kind of fall apart in the second half, but not because of the monsters. With that one,
The Terror. Remind us about that one a little bit, and also the hopefully non-existent viewers.
it's the one that they're like searching for the Northwest Passage.
Oh,
They get stuck in the ice, and also it's like a magic bear.
wait, that's called The Terror? Oh, I thought it was like the horror or something.
I mean, basically.
I mean, I don't
Yeah, fair
necessarily
enough.
think I don't think that the existence of monsters in this movie made it worse, but I was kind of vibing with like the whole we need to survive against this cave, and
That
then
was
it felt like they could have done introduced monsters and then had like cool moments as well, but I just feel like they kind of flopped on that.
that's what this movie
Yeah.
needed about this. It needed better monsters, and it needed like a convalescence between the monsters and the cave.
Mhm.
The cave needed to be less of a little bitch. Well,
It's really classic
honestly,
towards the beginning where it's like right before they figured out that she lied to them. Which is also kind of a cool scene because she was like, well, I said it for this cave. That's not what this fucking is it? Uh, but like they're like just in there. She's like freaking out. And it's like, all right, just need to get the tools. And then like they hear the rumbling. It's like, you know what? Forget the tools. We're moving.
and that's kind of the interesting thing. Like the movie becomes so focused on the monsters, the cave isn't even really like an obstacle in the way it is for the first half.
Oh yeah, that's what
Yeah,
everyone's been saying.
that's what
Yeah.
we were complaining about.
Well, yeah, I was just kind of like wrapping it up because you guys were like talking around it a lot, and I just wanted to like,
Yep. Do we want to talk about time crimes?
I do,
Yeah,
because I think that's going to be a more interesting discussion.
I love
Considering,
this movie. This is great.
it's the only time travel movie I liked. The
I'm not
Tanner.
gonna say I liked it. I do think it is a very good encapsulation of everything I hate about time travel movies, but also ways to kind of get around some of them. Not all of them. There's a lot of problems with that time travel nonsense. But it does fix some of the more like severe blisters.
I think one of the things that I really liked about this is that they just don't feel the need to explain the time travel at all. We don't figure out how it works. We don't necessarily have to sit around and get an explanation on like causality and the butterfly effect like every other time travel movie. They're just like don't interact with yourself. And he's like, all right, let me go stab myself in the arm real quick. Uh,
There's a weird So first of all, there's a weird bit of this movie where they feel the need to explain how time travel works. It's like, I don't. Yeah, this is a common trope in movies. You don't
Well,
need to explain this.
I will say the one thing that was important from that is that once he gets his past self into the time machine, he can go about living his life. I think that's an important thing because my immediate thought was, how does he fix this? Like, where does it end? And it's
Right
just
now.
it ends right as soon as the other guy leaves. So I think that was
But
important.
there's also this weird. So this movie is very much just like there's different like ways movies deal with time travel. So like there's a way of dealing with where it's like, okay, you can't go back in time and change these small things to like affect the future. Um, Sometimes more like strict about that than others. And then there's like the time travel, which is what this is, where it's like he was like you can't change things. Everything you do go back just confer like just the cause of the events that actually happen.
Yeah.
Which sounds
Well,
like
like,
weird. This is probably like why time travel movies fucking suck because you could if your only goal was to destroy the loop, you could. Like that guy, if like if we went back the second time or the first time, and he just like, all right, well, I know this window's not destroyed. Well, let's see what happens if I just destroy it. Just break it right now. Why not? He
well,
could.
I do have a problem with that because the whole point of the movie is the nature of time. How it works is if he broke the loop, none of this stuff would happen, right? Like,
But the
it
thing is, he could
at
break
the
the loop.
what I specifically liked about the movie is nothing, um, none of the events get erased from history because that's not how it works. History is immutable, so everything you experience has to happen. And
That's
so,
what I'm saying.
if he did break the loop, then uh, I just don't see like how how you, that would even make sense to break the loop. That would literally cause a paradox. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you could very easily cause like the only way this works is because Hector is kind of cooperating with time. Like
Yeah.
and it's
Well,
like bits
the
where like he does some kind of horrific stuff in this to make time happen the way it does. Whereas like in reality, he could just operate in the assumption like, well, it's gonna happen, so might as well, just let it happen. There's no reason for me to do the horrible thing. No reason for me to molest this girl. I can just assume she's gonna get molested. Or just be out there undressing for whatever reason.
I did find it a little bit strange how quickly Hector's just like, "Oh, I guess I have to do all of this." Right? Because when I first watched it and we see him actually like stop because he sees that girl, I just assumed, "Oh, that will happen. I guess something's going to happen with that girl." My first thought was not Hector needs to do it, but his was. And obviously
oh,
he needed to, but it was just not necessarily something that if I put myself in that situation, like I would not have thought that.
well, the point of the movie is he's like he is a servant to the events that are happening, and it's like it's kind of like the quote: "History is what happens to have happened."
Hmm.
And it's not like any of this was pre-planned by him. It's not like he looked into the situation and said, "Oh, I need this to happen." It's more like the only time I've, at least for me, I got a glimpse of he understood what he needed to do was at the end um, when he decides he's going to sacrifice the girl to save himself and his wife.
I totally disagree because he needed to do that. He did like for the second he did this like oh, this woman needs to expose her breast to get me to come
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm gonna come in and make that happen. And then
I
like on the second bit, where it's like, all right, someone needs to crash into me to get the girl to come here. All right, I'm gonna go and make that happen. Oh, I need to call this guy in order so he gets a phone call. It's not really what I'm saying. I just know I have to do this.
Yeah,
No,
I think the clearest moment when you start to realize like or when he starts to realize that he needs to do these things is when he finds himself in the crashed car and he sees the bandage on his arm and he wraps it around his face realizing, "Oh, this was me the whole time." And you immediately see him go into that mode of like, okay, girl, I need you to do something for me. And then he like finds the coat that he was wearing and he sees the scissors and he knows he has to take those. Like you see it very clearly from the moment where he wraps the bandage around his face that he knows what he has to do. He doesn't know everything that he
like
has to do, but he knows what he has to do.
I I read it as he was putting the bandage around his face because he's panicking, uh, because he was told he shouldn't interact with himself, and he's
I read
hoping
it
desperately that.
I read it entirely as he's panicking because he's realizing that he was the bandaged man that stabbed
There's also a
him.
bit where like he literally goes, "Oh shit, that me,"
Yeah.
when he does that.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, but that's still like, he did that as not to make these events happen, but because he was panicking about something else, and the situations came together to force him into that
And there's
position.
also a bit. It's kind of one of my favorite bits of the entire movie where he sees like he knows, okay, I have to do the thing where it's like I do my goggles and then turn around. And so he's like
Yeah.
watching out and does that different bits. It's
Yep.
like, all right, so here, let's do it real quick. Okay. It's like, oh no, here.
I I love how like calmly and coldly he just goes around and does things. Like the moment towards the end of Hector 2 where he has to like go against the glass and he just kind of like stands in front of it, stops for a moment, does that, and then he immediately just goes and sits down. And it's just like he knows what's happening, he knows what he needs to do, and he just has to do it. And it's so satisfying to watch.
Like, almost like he's a robotic servant of time.
But he
He's
can't. Like he could
it's
not
not
be.
it's not that time is driving him forward. It's that he's realizing that in order to get, Hector 1 out of here, he needs to do these things.
So I think that's actually the central disagreement we're having is I read the situation as time pushed him and the events pushed him into doing these things, and he wasn't really an active participant in it until the very end. Whereas, I guess for you guys, um, you saw it much more as like he immediately started acting to make events happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, why would he do these things if he wasn't trying to like
Yeah.
make time happen the way it did?
Like the way you're thinking about it, it would seem more like these events are just kind of occurring to him, but he very much is driving them forward. And it's not like, oh, this is just happening. It's okay, I need to get this girl here. I need her clothes to be off. And I just yep, you take your clothes off now, like he's very much driving the situation. It's not like this event is happening to him,
It's not
right?
incidental. It's
Yeah.
just he is literally trying to make this thing happen at this time because that's how he remembered it happening to him last time.
Mhm. I will say, guy has the best memory. He remembered everything because I totally forgot about the goggles thing, and he was like, "Yep, I got to do the goggles thing."
I do remember that bit. I do remember like the clothes thing. I remember that beforehand.
Hmm.
Like he remembered to drop the clothes at that point.
Yeah.
and see, but that's kind of like the central problem is, there's probably details that are different that well, not different, but you know, he remembered everything because that's everything that happened. Like if he didn't remember to do it, it didn't happen, so it wouldn't have started in the first place. Like that's kind of like the cyclical thing that I liked about it in the first place. That yeah, he's doing these things, but overall, they uh, he's not really an active participant because there's no agency to it.
I feel like the entire movie goes out of its way to disprove that theory, though. Like the moment where he is standing there holding the clothes, he knows he needs to drop it. He knows he needs to drop it at the right time, and he stands there and hesitates because he knows, oh, this isn't right yet. Hold on, hold on. Okay, that's about right. Like it's he has to make the active decision to hesitate there. If it was just like, oh, I have no agency in this, he would have just dropped it, right?
Is there's like movies like 12 Monkeys where it's like the entire theme is they go back in time and like try and fix things, but it ends up being that their actions actually inadvertently cause what they're trying to prevent. But this isn't that movie. This is a movie where a guy is like, all right, I know how things need to play out, and so I'm just gonna help them along.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Like I don't
I don't
understand
know.
why he would have lost his agency because he has it when he's Hector 1. Why would he all of a sudden lose his agency when he's Hector's 2 and 3?
Well, really, that was more my point. He never had agency. You know,
I mean, like I don't necessarily see why.
Well, for me, it's also just he never actively tries to fight against time and fail.
Yeah.
He's always the willing servant.
like, be, well, because you can't try to go against time. Like, that's not how time works, right? The
Like
entire movie, he's just responding to the events of the future hymns.
but like he's not responding to them. He's
Yeah,
actively causing them to happen.
Well, like, take it from the perspective of the first Hector, right? He gets stabbed, so he starts running. He's in a super scary situation where he's being guided along. So, like, from that exact moment, he never like chose his own fate.
well, the first
At
Hector,
at
yeah,
no point.
he's the one Hector that like his decisions make sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, all right, this all happened. Like, I think I remember watching like most of the first Hector bit, and then I tried to him about it. It was like, oh yeah, it's actually kind of cool and mysterious. Never really know what's going on. But that kind of goes away the instant the first Hector, you know, goes back in time,
So,
becomes Hector 2. Because at that point, you kind of know exactly what's coming. And he, again, like I said, he makes the decision to do these things for the specific reason that is, he knows those things happen. And he wants to make them happen.
I don't think it makes sense that you can say that both Hector 1 and Hector 2 are reacting to a situation when Hector 1 is very clearly reacting to a situation that Hector 2 is causing, right? Like
well,
Hector 2 can't be
but
reacting to the same situation that he was reacting to as he was Hector 1. That just doesn't really make sense.
but in a way they kind of are because he's still being played for the fool by Hector 3. Like, Hector 3 is the only one that really had agency.
And well, even
But
then, his agency is still just to make the things happen that he knows happens.
yeah, it's this like
Not,
Hector
not
3
like
plays
his agency is
basically
to
the
save
same.
his wife.
Hector 3 basically plays the same role as Hector 2. It's just in a different situation.
No, because Hector 3 what basically did everything to save his wife. That that was his goal. So, when he knows he got hit by the table, well, when he knows that he as Hector 2 got hit by the table, he's like, oh, boom. Like,
But yeah,
let me
the only
buy
reason he
time
does
to
that is
create the
like,
situation.
He knows that happens.
yeah, he's like, he does that because like, oh yeah, this happened. Like, what, it's like raises the question, like, what would happen if you just like, you know what, I'm not gonna throw this table. I'm just gonna be like, hey, Hector 2, look, let's chat for a second. Let's sit down. Like, let's think about this.
Yeah, the
Uh,
events of the movie would inherently be different
Yeah.
because
Like
that's how history works.
obviously you can't do that. That would create a paradox.
well, like, what would
Well,
happen? Like,
no.
because a paradox could so easily be created if this guy just was like, fuck time, fuck you. What would happen if that prediction was created? Would like the universe end?
I mean, yeah, but well, no, like the whole point of time is there's no way to do that. Like the
But
whole point
again,
of the movie is
it
there's no
could.
path towards.
It's so easy. It would be so easy for them to do.
Hmm.
But if they did, then it wouldn't have happened. Like it goes back to the thing. History is what happens to have happened, and
The thing is that it only applies with like that person isn't. Oh yeah, I can't go back and affect the results of the Napoleonic War. What if I could? What if I was just there? It's like, all right, I could play it out exactly like I played it out, or I could just not.
Well,
but I mean
the
that's
whole problem is that as soon as you do something drastically different like that, like talking to Hector 2, all of a sudden Hector 3 has no reason to go back in time, right? If Hector 2 doesn't screw up, Hector 3 doesn't exist, which means that Hector 3 wouldn't have talked to Hector 2, which means that Hector 3 should exist. Like it's just the definition of
I
a
time
paradox.
travel fucking sucks. It's a terrible storytelling component.
But like
well,
that didn't happen in the movie. It's really just
My
like
point is, this movie only works because Hector is on board with it working.
yes. But I don't
If he was,
necessarily think that that means he doesn't have any agency in the situations.
well, I think what Austin saying is wrong. What I'm saying is time travel fucking sucks as a story component.
okay. So let, let me put it this way. If we went back in time, like let's go with your example of changing the Napoleonic Wars. You know, inherently going back in time won't change what happened because by definition that's what happened, right?
Like, but again, if I was a cynical actor, right, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back in time, and my only goal in life, my only goal for doing this is to say, I'm gonna make something that happens that didn't happen the way, or make something happen that didn't happen the way it did in history that I learned.
And that's inherently the point that I like about the movie is that that isn't a situation that it is possible or even makes sense. Like even if your only goal is to make like the very fact that you learned it as history means that that is immutable and will happen no matter what.
But I'm saying
Like even as a cynical actor, you could not change it because the past is immutable.
but see, the thing is, that guy could. If that guy was like, all right, I'm just going to change the past, I'm going to break this window right now.
But it
What
didn't.
would happen? But he could.
He would have had a broken window at the start.
All right. And then he would be like, all right, I'm going to break this other window.
And that window would have also been broken.
Yeah.
That's kind of my point.
But you'd only break windows that haven't been broken in your memory. Like, all right, I'm
Yeah,
going to
but
make sure I do something that is entirely opposite to what had happened, as I remember.
that doesn't work though, because as soon as you do that, your memory would change because you lived through the situation as you created it.
So are those the rules of this? And again, either way,
I
like you could
think
make a movie about like again, 12
yeah,
Monkeys. That's what it was.
you can absolutely make a movie like that. I think one of the nice things about this movie is that they just kind of don't address it and just it. I interpreted it, and I think Chandler did too, differently than Austin, in that Hector just kind of very quickly realizes, oh, I can't create a paradox, so I need to go about and do everything to make sure that I don't create a paradox because it's just gonna like otherwise it just doesn't work.
It helped me if that other guy who had to like. I remember looking up, like I watched it on Amazon, and I think only like Hector has a name. The other guys, the other like the girl's like just the girl on the bike, and the time travel guy, the guy who like owns the machine, just has another name. It would have helped my enjoyment of this movie a lot, honestly. It was like, okay, like you gotta understand the fate of like the universe is in your hands. If you create a paradox, this is done. We're screwed. And that would make Hector's actions make a lot more sense to me. Where it's like, him going to extreme lengths to make sure history plays out like it does, rather than just being a thing that is just gonna play out. It's like, why worry? Just let it happen. Go out for margaritas.
Well, I think the whole point is that it's not just gonna play out.
That's never established in the movie.
No.
Hitcher just kind of assumes that.
Yeah. Which is why I thought his character was super interesting, because if I was in that situation, I would assume the same thing as you. I would assume this is just gonna play out, but Hector doesn't. He just goes, okay, I guess I gotta do this. And I
I
just
guess
found that
Hector
super interesting.
did need the concept of time travel explained to him. So
Yeah.
he just kind of, he's not the smartest tool in the shit. Yeah. Something I will say is I did find the character of Hector fucking loathsome.
Interesting.
Whereas he takes like the most blunt force and like I did like how he did like legitimately love his wife. That was cute.
Mhm.
But he's like, all right, I'm just gonna murder this woman. Straight
I
up murder. And I'm not even gonna
about
like feel bad.
about that, in the movie, when he sees his dead wife, it is very clearly a doll, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't, yeah. The
That's
entire
just like budget constraints.
No, I actually think it's intentional. I 100% think it's intentional. I think they did a bad effect so that the entire time you watch Hector 3, you think he's going to make a doll. This isn't like we don't see the girl running through the house at all as Hector 2. We just see her foot hanging off the roof, and then we see her on the ground. That's it. And so the entire time, I was under the impression that he was going to make some kind of doll or save the girl's life. I did not think she was going to die until he pulled out like the second chair, and he just sits down and lets her die. The entire time I was like, obviously he's going to save her. And I 100% think that it was like a bad effect on purpose so that you would think that too. I thought it was so interesting.
Like Hector just seems like the sort of guy who takes the easy way out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
creativity to his problem solving.
I mean, but that's like the movie, you know? The movie is there's no other way,
Mhm. Yeah.
He just doesn't
you
even
know?
try though. That's the part that bugs me. There's no point where he's like, all right, I'm gonna try and do this in a way that doesn't make me a whole person, but oh wait, oh no, the same result comes out regardless. No, he's just like, for a minute, was like, all right, yeah, got a knife to you, which sounds like weird saying. It's like, it's not a gun, it's a knife. You can't just
Yeah.
run.
Like, yeah, a lot of the principal actors like don't really make the most sense, but you know, when you keep in mind that nothing about his memory can be different. Nothing can happen different than his memory. Yeah, you know, it's one of those details you kind of just have to like gloss over, I guess.
It just, yeah, he just makes zero. Like he just assumes that, all right, well, this is on me to make this happen, which, yeah, it's like kind of the exasperated problem. So, with like my childhood original, I did want to say one thing about this that does the one thing like that I do hate about time travel. This movie does very well, and that is that it creates very firm rules for when and where you can time travel to.
Mhm.
You can only travel to this tank when it is turned on. It doesn't matter if you're like you. It has to be turned on to travel to that thing.
Yep.
Whereas like usually like the comic book about time travel is like, well, why don't they just send back an entire army of people and just keep to like whatever time period like would be the easiest and just like try different things. Why not? And like why is there ever a rush in time travel films? And I feel like this movie does like dodges that problem very skillfully.
Mhm.
See, because really the thing that makes me think that the reason why I liked how the movie dodges the thing is by accepting that nothing can be different from your memory. And to me, that's like the biggest conceit that I don't like about time travel is, when you accept that your memories can be wrong, that kind of, it kind of creates the problems you're talking about. Why rush? Your memories don't really matter when you change the outcome, and so it's kind of a so I think it's interesting that you and I have felt like time travel movies had similar problems, and we accepted different aspects as a solution for it.
Yeah. Do we want to
So,
rate the movies?
Yeah.
yeah.
What are
So,
we thinking about The Descent?
well, less than.
Less
So
than.
clearly
Okay,
less
yeah,
than.
same.
I was gonna like before I went into this, I was thinking, I'll be somebody, but like actually talking about it.
Yeah, I think talking about it made me like it less. Cause like
Yeah.
as far as a horror movie goes, it's fine. I don't hate it. I wouldn't
Well,
necessarily
it
recommend
commits.
it. uh,
Well, it commits the cardinal sin that only horror movies and comedies are capable of. It didn't accomplish its purpose.
fair, fair.
So, like, it's hard to give it anything above a 0 when it just doesn't accomplish the goal.
I mean, I will say for me, it is like even take it as a whole, it is way scarier than most horror films. For me, like for horror films, I kind of just really like the aesthetic. I don't really get that scared in horror films. Like this movie did make me uncomfortable at several points.
Specifically because you're claustrophobic. That's a little bit cheating.
I mean, playing on fears is what horror does.
Yeah.
Well,
There are movies that would be
like,
scarier to me than anyone else because I'm arachnophobic. So,
yeah, but if the only elements of what scare you are arachnophobic, then like a box of spiders is doing the movie's job better. Like
that's
the
fair.
point of a horror movie.
Oh, but Box Bears is real. It's part of the fun of horror film is that it's indulging these fears in a safe environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
If I want to be scared, that's easy enough.
and like well, the way I see it is, a horror movie needs to scare more people than it doesn't scare,
Mhm.
because otherwise, like there's safe ways to trigger your fear of spiders with a box of spiders. Put a clear lid on it and then tear in. You
So
know.
I mean, I don't know. I'm very much of the belief that like movies are like like these ratings are personal ratings. Like just because I think this movie is better than you think it doesn't mean all of our ratings are wrong. It's just so they could have like I have a friend. You guys are Mitch.
Mhm.
I watched fuck what was it the what was Austin what was like the sniper movie where it's like he never fires a shot.
Oh, Jarhead.
Yeah, Jarhead. Well, it's like he was talking about how it's like that movie seems so good to him because he was like actually in the military and he understands all that bullshit that goes into that. It's like that personal experience makes that movie better for him, and that's totally an acceptable way to rate these things.
Mhm.
But what makes Jarhead good is us as the lay people can also get a sense of the frustration and the bullshit of military life.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not
I mean,
like
even if this movie didn't scare me, I got enjoyment out of it. Just because it's a horror film, if it doesn't scare me, like I could still like a movie, even if it's not like overtly scary, right? Like maybe I wouldn't call it a horror film. Maybe I call it something else, a thriller or something. But I don't know. Like,
Uh,
I
the
I
big,
feel like taking.
I was just, like, the big conflict for me is what is more legitimate? My view coming right out of it, being like, it's disappointing, versus my view having actually like thought about it and discussed it.
Well, I would say the most legitimate one is the thought you're having right now.
mm,
You know, because like at the end, that's what you settled on, and uh, I feel like part of a good movie, I feel like if you take the attitude of, if you're able to get some amount of enjoyment out of a movie, then it's not a terrible movie. But like, there's objectively like poorly shot films that are hilarious. Well, like, I mean, we'll take The Descent for me. I laughed at that movie more than I was scared. So what? Am I gonna like call it a comedy and be like, well, I laughed more than most comedies, so 7.2.
I
Like
mean,
that.
Like,
that's
I
not a
mean,
bad way of looking at movies.
if
Like,
you
please
got
don't watch.
if you got personal enjoyment out of a movie, it doesn't matter how. This
Like,
it's literally just your personal opinion. If you
I'm not
loved
like
this
Well,
movie because you
so
thought it was
concerned.
hilarious, then give it a 7.2. Give it whatever rating you want.
I'm not so concerned with authorial intent.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Ratings are entirely opinion based. So
yeah,
like there's
that's fair.
no way to give an objective rating. If you want to break it down, be like, okay, the lighting horrible. I hated the lighting in this movie, by the way. The camera work fantastic. The acting fantastic. Like, if you want to break it down that way, you can get a more objective score. But if it's just like, did you enjoy this movie? That's a different question.
Well, I guess that's the thing. I'm trying to separate like, did I enjoy this movie versus do I think it's a good movie? Because like, I have learned that I can gain enjoyment from a stick and some mud. Poke the mud. So that doesn't make it a good experience. Just you know,
I mean, if you were rating that experience, though, despite the fact that you got some amount of enjoyment of it, you could probably rate that experience 1 to 10. And you got enjoyment doesn't mean it's going to be a high rating, but you still got some enjoyment out of it, right?
Like, why not? If you had a
Yeah.
really good
well,
time playing in that mud,
Like,
yeah.
I still don't believe that The Descent is above a 7.2. I'm putting it below a 7.2.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying, like, just because there was no horror element doesn't mean I want to give it a 0, which is something that you said earlier.
yeah, and I stand by that
Yeah,
because
and like I
to a
don't
certain
agree
degree
with
we have to
that because
hold.
I enjoyed the film. I just don't necessarily think that it belongs at a 7.2.
Like, well, okay, well, since we agree that it's entirely opinion based, I'll just tell you my opinion on how I rate things, and
That's
feel free to
fair. You
disagree or
know what?
not.
Yeah,
That
that's
it
fair.
doesn't
That's
matter.
fair.
Like to me, if they set out, horror movies and comedies in particular, like it's a lot easier for me to be binary because I when you set out with those kind of goals, I want to hold them accountable to those goals. So
I don't know.
for me, if I could, I'd give it a 0.
So I will say that I am a big enjoyer of the horror genre, but like I said earlier, I don't actually find that many horror movies scary. I just kind of like that more like weighty feel to human life and experience.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's not atmospheric.
Alright.
That's a type of fear. Like it's a app. Well,
I mean, there were moments in this movie that did scare me. I got jump scared a couple times. I wouldn't necessarily call that horror. It's more just, oh, got jump scared. Like that feeling goes away immediately, but I got scared, right? So, does that immediately mean that it's not a 0?
well, yeah. That means it's something higher than a 0, and
Okay.
from there,
Like
you
for
know,
your definition, I have to rate Alien a 0 because it's really not that scary a movie. But it's still a
well,
cool, well shot, well paced movie that I really enjoy watching.
yeah, like well, no, because you still felt the oppressive atmosphere. Like the purpose of Alien was not to scare; it was to give you the atmosphere of the situation, right? And when you add jump scares, the movie very loudly intent shows its intent to be scary rather than atmospheric.
I mean, I feel like this, like something that old cave business does, is it does create this isolating atmosphere.
I
Which
mean,
the
in
actors have to
atmosphere, I
operate.
just did not feel. I did not feel isolated at any point throughout the movie.
I
So,
guess it's
you
kind of
know,
hard to feel
for me, it's
isolated.
a 0.
It's kind of hard to feel isolated in particular when there's like
Like,
1,000 monsters. And you're there with a group of like 5 friends, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Like part of what ruined the movie for
there
me is
is
specifically.
yeah, there is a spooky atmosphere to it, I think. So I don't know. I would still put this in the horror genre, even if like coming out of this movie, I'm not like, oh yeah, I was terrified. You know, it's like I got scared when they jump scared, but like you could jump scare me in real life, like, very easily. It's very easy to jump scare me, so it's like.
Uh, and yeah, and really the only point I was trying to make was this movie failed in its goals spectacularly. Like
Mhm.
in in such a way that
I guess
it makes any other positive qualities unredeemable.
it is just important to say that that is for you,
Yeah.
because it didn't do that for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
But regardless, I'm giving it below a 7.2.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time arguing over the game
Yeah.
score.
I think I probably am too.
Okay.
Like I
Don't
did.
let us pressure into giving it a score that you don't
I mean,
want.
I was on the fence beforehand. Like
Mhm.
that's the reason like this kind of thing was about talking about. Like, do I? Yeah, I don't know. I think this movie is just kind of stupid. Like, I do to a certain extent value, how you feel about like what you take away from something. Like, there's the experience watching it, but there's a lot of things. But like the vast majority, of, like what you actually like like how this actually impacts your life is kind of what you take away. Right? If I just like I watch it, I think it's fine. I don't really like think about it again. That is worse to be the movie that I watch and think is fine, and then think about the implications and stuff later on, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Whereas the movie, like I watched it, thought it was fine. It's like the more I think about it, it's like, wait, this is stupid.
Yep.
So I'm gonna give it less than 7.2. Not that I think it's a bad movie, by any means,
Yeah.
but
How about
Fair
time
enough.
crimes?
fuck time travel.
I think I'm
Fair
giving
enough.
this a 7.2. I don't think it necessarily deserves to go above, though I'm tempted to because I enjoyed it a lot, but
I mean, that's fair enough. Like this is probably the best time travel movie I've ever watched. Like straight up.
I'm not as against time travel as you are. So like I'm definitely willing to watch a time travel movie. I don't know, like I can't really think of many that I've seen, but I'm not against it.
And for me, because it's the only time travel movie I've ever liked, I'm definitely gonna give it above 7.2.
Nice. We got the
So
whole array in there.
yeah, first
Hell
time I
yeah.
think.
Maybe, yeah.
Like we all disagreed. Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed it, so like I could argue for above a 7.2, but I think one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this podcast once we started looking through the movies because Time Crimes, because that's a sick name. And so to me it is just like the epitome of a 7.2, so like I just have to leave it there.
Hey, I had a very clear idea in my head of what this. Not researching at all. I had a very clear idea what I thought this movie would be about, and I thought it'd be about some guy like breaking some time law and time cops coming in and stopping it. And then it never happened. It was like, oh my god, this is just so not the movie I thought it was gonna be. Like
Yeah.
this movie is smarter than that name would imply. I like so much.
Perfect way of putting it.
And with that, thanks for watching.
Yep. But